First of all, welcome. Welcome to this question and answer webinar. It's here because of a couple of reasons. One, because lots of people ask questions inside the Facebook group. This is the opportunity to answer those questions. And two, shameless plug, it's a great funnel into our Academy program, which may work for you, it may not, but we're always very honest with people about whether it would or it wouldn't. But so from this, a lot of people will go, hey, do you know, I want to find out more. I'll come and join that Academy thing because I like the sound of it. So yeah, there's the shameless plug. Right, let's go into business though. So tonight I said I was going to take a look at scenario, forward-facing question type things. The sort of things that can really, really trip you up in your promotion board. And for Emma and Andy, who might be thinking, who is this guy? Why should we listen to him? I got promoted to sergeant in 1993. So that's quite a few years ago. What's that, like 31 years ago now? And after about a year of being a sergeant, I started getting people coming to me saying, do you think you could help me with my promotion board, specialist interview, prepare me for? And so on and off, I've been doing this now for 3 decades, 3 decades. So anyway, retired 11 years ago. And this is my business now. This is what we do. I've got a great team around me of coaches. I'm just going to let someone else into the room. Got a great team of coaches around me, people who I've handpicked, people who I've known for years, people like Andrea and I were fighting crime with each other in 1992 as constables. So I've known her for a long, long time. Got some awesome people who are amazing coaches. And what we do is we specialize in taking people from where they are now, which might be struggling, to a passing the promotion board. And that gap, we know how to close that gap really, really well because we've been doing it for so long. We've done it for hundreds and hundreds of people. Does that sound good? Sound good? All right, awesome. So tonight, the big draw was we're going to take a look at scenario-based questions. We don't have to stick to that. If anyone's got a burning issue, they're like, I'm really stuck with something, whatever it might be, then we can take a look at that as well. But does that sound good? Scenario-based? Scenario-based? Is anyone expecting a scenario-based type question in their board? Should we start with that? Oh, actually, no, should we start with, has anyone got any burning questions? Has anyone got any questions they want to ask before we start? No? Awesome. Right. Scenario type questions then. You're all here because you've got a board ahead of you. So yeah, what is it you're expecting? What sort of scenario-based questions, if any, are you expecting? And this is where you've got to talk, because otherwise it doesn't work.
I appreciate, Brendan, there's other people on the call that have obviously not been involved in any of these, but I'll go. So our promotion process has been advertised today, and there's going to be a briefing to deliver to the ACC.
Okay.
So obviously that's at chief inspector level. Done one of these before, I think probably about 4 or 5 years ago, where they give you half a dozen bits of paper. Some you can almost put in the bin, but they're obviously looking at how you prioritize the work and what you're going to deal with and what you're going to delegate in essence.
Okay. Effectively an in-tray. Yeah, it's just an in-tray really, isn't it? You're going to do a briefing on an in-tray. So not really a scenario. I can sort of touch on it if you want. Sort of my ideas around strategizing, if you call it that, because we often hear that word, we need to have a strategy on this. Whenever I hear anyone say that, I normally think they either really know what they're talking about or they don't, which is why they're using big words like strategy. Anyway, we can look at that in a moment. Okay, what else? Is there anything, is that it? Just a briefing, or is there more to it, Andy?
I know there's questions after that. It's got to go through 2 paper sifts, then the briefing, then the interview.
So 2 paper sifts, briefing, then interview. They're all separate things.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Mass is saying, I think I've joined the wrong webinar. All right, whatever. That's fine. Oh, Mass is gone anyway. So Mass is probably a potential recruit thinking, I've mixed up Wednesday and Monday. So they're all separate things in Andy. So separate. So you'll do the briefing, you do a paper sift, get through that, you then get invited to a briefing. If you get through that, you then get invited to a board.
Yep.
All right. So so they're expecting lots of applicants for very few places then.
Well, I reckon there's around about 9 or 10 spaces, which for a force of the size of that I'm in is quite a few. Um, but I think they're expecting a lot of people to just throw the hat in the ring.
Yeah, because why not? Yeah, why not? I never threw my hat in the ring because I did not want to be a chief inspector or a superintendent. I got to inspector and just took one look above and thought, nope, it's just not for me. But like football coaches, you might not be that good at football, but I'm good at coaching. So, okay, all right. So the reason I said that could be competitive is because there seems to be a lot of, there's a paper sift, briefing, board. There's sifting people out until they get to the board. Yeah, and you've got a briefing to an ACC, so a lot of people are going to get sifted out at the paper sift because an ACC is not going to waste his or her time in front of people who are like, why am I listening to this person? Because this is just dog shit. Who put this person in front of me? They'll be really pissed off because an ACC's time is really valuable. So the paper sift is going to really sift out a lot. And then the reason why I think they're going for a briefing is because they want to see, actually, operational, can you cut it? Can you cut it operationally in front of an ACC who's asking difficult questions, who actually could be your chief superintendent, asking difficult questions about whatever the thing is? So my guess is they'll paper sift a lot out, only to have quite, if you've got 9 or 10 spaces, my guess is they'll be doing briefings for around 15, maybe 20, no more than 20. Does that make sense, Andy?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's going to get competitive. The paper sift will sift out it'll sift out some good people as well. Because paper sifts do, because some people are really shit at writing themselves up. And because of that, they just can't ever get in front of someone live face to face because they just can't get through a paper sift. It's because they tend to write a complete and utter load of BS because they think, just using a load of phrases from the CVF is going to entertain the assessors, and it's not. All right, okay, take a look at that in a moment. The theme tonight, though, was scenario-based questions. So is anyone else, like Emma or Robert or Andy, expecting scenario-based type questions?
Yeah, I've well, the sergeants has just come out for me in GMP. So I'm looking to do the board. Well, the interviews are going to be between the 15th of November to the 20th of December or something like that. So I'm looking probably towards the mid-December to have my board, which will consist of a 10-minute presentation and 6 questions, 3 forward facing, 3 backward.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at anything that can help towards that.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just oh God, what have I done here? So I'm just letting someone in the group who. Okay, so 10-minute presentation. That's on the plan on the page.
Yeah.
So how's the sergeant will you deliver the plan on the page? Boom. That's it.
Yeah.
We've worked with lots of sergeant and inspector candidates for GMP. And the 6 questions, you're right, they're 3 forward, 3 rear. So there's no scenario. Although the forward facing, the way to answer them is to create them as a scenario. All right, more about that in a moment. Okay, cool. Robert, you're saying, no, I'm not going to get any scenarios. And what about yourself, Andy?
Yeah, I don't really know too much about my forces, what they're planning to do. They've not really released a great deal, other than similar to Emma, that so with Andy, they're doing paper sifts. But before the paper sift, they're going to do some scenario based, which I believe will be forward facing. How many? I don't know.
So scenario based is a paper sift.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. So it sounds like, as usual, there's a real mix of every force does something completely differently, and every force sometimes changes things as they go along, because they might do something new this year that didn't do last year, good old GMP, my old stomping ground, looks like they're sticking to what they did last time and the time before that, which I quite like actually, because I think people start getting a bit disorientated if things get changed all the time. GMP, it's a real Marmite thing, GMP, isn't it? It's like 95% of the time I absolutely loved it. 5% of the time I absolutely hated it, really. Anyway, let's not get into that. Okay, so let's answer some of your questions. So Andy, the briefing, and then we'll look at Emma and how you can actually take a forward-facing question and why you actually need to turn it into a scenario. All right, why you need to turn it into a scenario. Will that work for everyone? Like, will that work? Will that be okay? Great stuff. So, Andy, have you done a briefing before to this type of assessment? Have you done a briefing like this before?
Yeah, so one we had about 4 years ago gave us a booklet of various things that were happening, and you had to deliver a 10-minute presentation or briefing in terms of the things that was in that pack. So from what I recall, there was issues around, there was a live firearms incident involving an OCG, and the diktat was that you were the duty silver commander. There was a PSD issue in terms of the gross misconduct. There was an issue with race hate. There was an issue around 101, the people not being able to get through. And there was something else I can't quite remember off the top of my head. What I missed on this was on the Friday before the boards, there'd been a big issue about 101 because I'd been on leave and didn't check my emails. And the chief constable had put a load of things that they wanted to happen about 101. My board was first thing Monday morning, completely overlooked the 101 in terms of impact on public confidence, not being able to get through. And I ran the firearms job. That's where I nailed my colours to the mast. I gave the PSD issue to PSD. The other stuff in terms of the race hate, I said we'll deal with that at a later time because my focus was on that's happening now, and I need to make sure we're public safety and that incident dealt with.
Okay, so to what extent did you? I mean, a PSD issue, people can't get through on 101. Don't sound very chief inspector things to me.
Well, all I can say is that was what was in the pack at the time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you then, how much delegating did you do, or would you expect to do in the future if you're going to do well, hopefully you are going to do the board again, but how much delegating would you do? Or how much delegating did you do last time? Real sort of time?
I delegated 5 out of the 6.
Right. Because I'm looking at a PSD issue. Why does a chief inspector need to deal with that? People calling 101 and they can't get through for some reason. Why would a chief inspector be investigating that? They'd have an oversight on it, but yeah, I can't see any reason why you'd actually be getting hands-on with that. Whereas the live firearms issue, where you're the duty silver and it's involving OCG, and that's something where you've actually got an operational tactical position. So what went wrong then? What went wrong last time?
Well, that was the feedback I got, was I nailed the colours too much to the mast in terms of dealing with the operational one, rather than looking at the bigger organisational strategic element of the impact on public confidence around 101.
Okay. Well, I'm not saying that you know, 101 I'd delegated, but all right. So where I'm going with this is strategy. You've got limited resources, and you've got to work out what it is that you want to achieve with those limited resources. So it's just prioritization. You know, whenever anyone ever talks about we need a strategy, I just think, right, you could just translate that into we need to work out how we're going to prioritize our limited resources to tackle unlimited problems. So we've got to work out which problems that we're going to tackle, which ones aren't we going to tackle. So I'm not saying that you just give it, delegate it, and not have involvement in it. But yeah, it just doesn't sound really difficult there. I mean, I suppose the mistake you made was that you nailed your colours to the mast in terms of one thing, and you didn't talk about the others. So there was no balance there, is my guess.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I ran out of time, so there was obviously a timing issue because I think I'd gone through the whole NDM and what my strategy would be in terms of how I was going to deal with that incident and investigation teams I was going to set up, etc., etc. So I probably
10
went far too
minutes is
deep.
nothing. Yeah, 10 minutes is nothing. 10 minutes is a blink of an eye. So yeah, it just doesn't sound, the whole thing doesn't actually sound really challenging, because you'd expect someone who's going to be a chief inspector in the control room to be switched on in terms of how to deal with a live firearms issue as a duty silver that involves OCG. The rest of it, the gross misconduct 101, they sound inspectory type things anyway. They don't, I don't know, it just doesn't feel very chief inspectory anyway. So yeah, my advice there would just be like, make sure you're better balanced next time in terms of what you talk about and how you're going to do it and what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I think the irony is they sacked it off and only did it that 1 year, which probably was part of the feedback. Yeah.
They didn't what, sorry?
They sacked it off. They only did it once. They haven't done it again since. So this is the first time.
The breaching?
Yeah, yeah. This is the first time they've brought it back again since then.
I don't think it'd be anything like what you describe. I think it'd be completely different, because you know that's you talked about chief inspector in the control room. Is that what the position they put you in?
They just said at the time you were the duty silver, so you would still be doing your day job but picking up the firearms.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you meant in the control room. Sorry. Okay. It just doesn't sound. It doesn't sound very testing, really, because dealing with that firearms incident, it's very tactical. You've got to forgive me, I'm 10 years out of the job, so if you asked me to run something like that, I'd be completely hopeless now. But the rest of it doesn't sound particularly testing. A PSD issue, yeah, inspectors can deal with that, sergeants can deal with that. 101, people aren't getting through. I suppose where they're looking at is as to how you're linking it in with the chief's vision, and how you're going to ensure that you are prioritizing limited resources against unlimited demands. I don't know. I don't think it'd be that. I think it'd be something far more challenging. If they're bringing it in again, if they ditched it 1 year and now they're bringing it back, I think it'd be something completely different. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Andy, but I've not really got any major big advice around this other than, yeah, you've got to cover everything off. 10 minutes is hardly any time at all. So you can't go too deep into anything. Yeah, 6 things. If they give you 6 things, that's a minute and a half for each one. You've got 30 seconds of messing around time at the beginning and the end. So you're looking at about a minute 15 for each one. I suppose, so some of them you want to allocate more time to than others. So if you allocate a minute and a half, a minute 45 to some of the more big chunky ones, then you've got like 30 seconds to deal with some of the others. So your time management, I think, might be one of the most important factors in deciding whether you're going to pass or fail that briefing. Yeah, I don't know, Andy, have you got any other questions about that? Because that just seems, unless they make it more complicated, but if they make it more complicated, they need to give you more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think the thing for me would be is the clarity around, well, tell me what my role is before you expect me to answer these 5, 6 things or whatever it might be.
Right. Well, that gets into this whole thing around forward-facing questions. So if they're a bit woolly about that, then what I would do at the very beginning is I'd start off by saying, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm putting myself in the role of a operational chief inspector based in X division. Do it that way. As opposed to, for the purposes of this, I'm placing myself as a chief inspector who works primarily in professional standards, or a detective chief inspector who works in special branch at the ports unit. it just makes no sense. I would actually place myself in that position and create the scenario. So in this scenario, I've got response inspectors available, neighbourhood inspectors available. I've got X number of sergeants, and I've probably got about X number of constables. I've got a partnership relationship with other organisations, blah, 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 blah. You just create the scenario. And then it makes it a lot easier for you to hang your hat on. Otherwise, it can just get a bit woolly, I think, because you can't actually contextualise it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's where I'd go with it. If they are deliberately not giving you the role, then create it. So for the purposes of this briefing, I'm putting myself in a position of, and you know, this links in with Emma as well with her presentation. I'll come to that in a moment. I always recommend, and I know certainly the rest of the coaches in the Blue Light team do this as well. We recommend that you put yourself into an operational context, even if you're being told when you get promoted, you will stay in situ in some really niche, you know, there's only like 2 of you in the whole force that can do this role type position. Don't imagine that to be the case. On your board, put yourself in something that's very operational, the sort of thing that most people are going to get promoted into, even if you've been assured 120% that when you get promoted, you're going to stay in this real niche area. Like you're going to be a detective sergeant in some niche area of the force that other people have never even heard of. So I'd always place myself in a position of, for the purpose of this answer, I'm going to provide some context. And that context is that I will be answering this as a sergeant who's operational, out on division, and this is how I'd apply the plan on the page. This is how I'd apply myself to these scenarios that you've given me. Does that make sense, Andy?
Yep.
Any questions about that?
No, like I said, I think it makes sense to say, you know, I'm performing this role and I'm going to answer the questions or briefing in that particular circumstance, if you like. So yeah.
I just think it makes it a lot easier, and it's certainly the advice we give everyone in our academy program, because they struggle with it as well. Like, well, what is my role? Well, because they've not told you, you fill in the gaps. You know, you fill in the gaps. They've not told you for a reason, and it's so they can see whether you're going to fill in the gaps. So just fill in the gaps for them. And the majority, you're probably banking on, you know, you may have some specialists on your board, but they're all familiar with what goes on operationally, or they should be. If they're not, then they need to be. They should be. Whereas you can't guarantee that a superintendent or chief superintendent who's on your board is familiar with your world if you're in some specialist department, because they may be scratching their heads just going, I didn't even know that department existed. You know, and I still hear from people who, when they join the academy, I'll say, so what is it you actually do? And they'll tell me what they do. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I had no idea that police officers did that. You know, so still almost 40 years later, I'm learning about roles that I just didn't even know existed. So you can't bank on the superintendent knowing all about your role and all about your really niche position that only like 2 of you in the force can do. Or there's one person who's in our academy at the moment. He is the only person in his force who is able to do the thing that he does. I'm not even going to say what it is, but there's no one else in the force. That's it. You know, so they're really banking on him getting promoted because he's acting at the moment. He's in a temporary position. If he doesn't get promoted, they're going to have to try and find someone from outside of the force to transfer in to do this role. I think that's really bad planning, by the way. If you're ever in that position, don't be. You know, just do not be in that position in any force, because it means you've got no resilience. Because if you decide to leave the next day and you hand your 4 weeks notice in, then the force is really in the shit. So you should always have a backup, definitely always have a backup. But all of his answers are going to be given in the context of being a sergeant on response. Because if he gives any of his answers in the context of sergeant in his niche, then there's no guarantee that the people on the board are going to have a clue what he's talking about. Whereas they're always going to be able to understand, sergeant on response. I get that. I used to be one. Because I don't think there's many people who've not been detective sergeant or sergeant out on the front line who get to superintendent. There's probably a few dotted around, but most of them will have done their time in the trenches. Yeah, so that'd be my advice. All right, awesome. That wasn't a tough question to answer. Emma, go on, present me with some tough questions then, some tough conundrums.
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm mainly interested in the. There's a lot of information out there on the questions that yourself do and others. But I don't find there's a lot of information on the presentation.
Right.
So I'm kind of I'm creating scenarios for the different style of questions, and I know like hook, story, and results for the forward facing. But
No, hook, story, close.
That hook, story, close, yeah.
Yeah.
But with the presentation, I don't really know how to cater the question, like cater the question into a presentation.
Well, you've got 10 minutes. And like I said, that goes by and that's a blink of an eye again. It's like no time at all.
Yeah.
You know, you've got your boards coming up in potentially 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. How many times have you practiced delivering a presentation on how you as a sergeant are going to deliver the plan on the page?
I haven't yet. I haven't practiced yet, and that's not because of lack of planning. I've only just found out my results for my sergeant's exam, which I've passed.
Oh, cool.
And then I've put myself in for the board this time. Obviously, I want to put the preparation in, but also as a bit of a basis of, right, okay, this is the layout, how they're going to expect it. And maybe if I dip this time, then I'll go for it the next time.
Well, don't dip this time.
No, but yeah, that's my plan.
Yeah. Yeah, make sure you pass it. Don't give yourself an escape route, because if you give your mind an escape route, it'll go, oh, it's okay, I'm allowed to fail this time.
I know.
Yeah, so that failure is not an option. Passing is the only option. So our experience of helping people with things like these 10-minute presentations on how you're going to deliver the plan on the pages, most people are far too ambitious and have not practiced enough, you know, because there's a lot on your plan on the page. Because, I mean, do you know the history of plan on the page?
I know that it was horrendous before. It's actually more simplified now. The plan on the page from what it was, but I know it's come from our new chief constable, who wanted to kind of direct the force in a way that was less complicated. I know about that much.
Yeah, the history behind it is it came from the Special Constabulary. They were the first ones to use it. Because no one ever reads what the force strategy is, like 40 pages of stuff. I mean, honesty time. Have any of you read the PCC's 5-year plan strategy? Yeah, you don't have to say anything. Just I know the answer to that question. Yeah, because I've said that before to some people and they've gone, "What? We've got a 5-year strategy?" Like, are we? Wow, I didn't even know that was a thing. No one reads that stuff. Like I've just thrown them all away now. But I did print off some force strategies. I've got, unless it's improved, I've got to say West Yorkshire Police's is the most compilated. That's not even a word. Complicated, convoluted pile of just buzzwordy. It's like they've thrown everything into it. It's about 40 pages of confusion. And my guess is if I showed it to 100 police officers from a variety of ranks, PC, sergeant, and inspector, I'd perhaps get 2 out of 100 saying I've actually read it. Actually, probably those 2 would say, well, I say you read it, and they've gone, well, I've flicked through it. So planning the page came from that there's a realization that no one actually reads any of this stuff. No one. I mean, we're kidding ourselves if we think anyone actually reads this stuff cover to cover. I do, actually. I did, which is where I came to the conclusion that no one reads this stuff because they'll get to like page 5 and just completely lose the will to live. And so about, God, I can remember it now. It was I think it was in the 90s, the Special Constabulary, and the chief who had the lead for it, I think, was North Yorkshire Police, came up with, let's just simplify it, because our special constables, they've got even less time and will and inclination to read all of these big documents. So if our response officers, if our officers who are actually employed full-time aren't reading it, how can we expect people who are part-time to read it? And so they just thought, let's just simplify it all and put it on a page. And so that's the history of it, as far as I can make out. The first time I saw any reference to plan on a page was at a special constabulary conference that I attended over 20 years ago. And I went, well, that's a good idea. And it seems to have picked up and taken off since then. But as Emma alluded to, what tended to happen is this has made the font size smaller and smaller and smaller until you needed a little magnifying glass to actually read any of it, because we want to put so much stuff in it. That's not the idea. The idea is to simplify things so that everyone is crystal clear, again, about strategy. You've got limited resources that you need to apply to unlimited problems. You know, that is as simple as that. So the plan on the page is looking at how are you going to take your team of 7 or 8 constables and make sure that all of their efforts are aligned to what the chief wants them to be aligned to. Does that make sense so far, Emma? So you can't cover everything in 10 minutes, though, because if you do that, what do you think will happen, Emma, if you try and cover all of the plan on the page? I mean, I've not seen it recently, but how many things are on the plan? How many priorities are on the plan on the page at the moment?
I think there's 12.
Right. So if you try and cover all 12 in 10 minutes, what's going to happen?
We're just going to be listing a shopping list.
Yeah, you've heard me already. You've seen my videos. You've heard me referring to, you'll just deliver a boring shopping list and no one is going to remember anything that you've said because it's boring and it's just like the same old things. I'll check they've got their PDRs up to date. I'll make sure their NCAL are. I'll make sure I'll quality assure every stop and search form. Forgive me, but bored already. So what we ask our clients to do is just pick 2 or 3 of them. So out of the 12, which ones do you think are keeping the chief awake at night? Mr. Watson, I'm sure he wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning thinking, oh shit, why is this buzzing around my head at 4 o'clock in the morning when I should be snoozing, dreaming of retirement one day? What are the 1 to 3 things, no more than 3 things that he's like every morning is like, why can't we just sort this shit out?
I would say gun crime with youths is probably one because it's rife at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say recruitment. It seems like the younger in service are leaving quicker than they can recruit them. The third thing.
Go on, third one. Go
on. I suppose it's whatever's the flavour of what's happening, you know, like the serious crime that's happened overnight. That, you know, you need to get those convictions for now.
No, don't knee jerk. No, you need to be, as a sergeant, you need to be consistent, because if you start knee jerking your constables around, they'll be like, oh God, Emma's just like the rest of them. She just can't make her mind up as to what's important. And everything's important. And if everything is important, nothing's important. And they'll just go and do their own thing. They'll just go and do whatever they think is important, as opposed to what you think is important, because what you think is important is what the chief thinks important. So out of those 12 things on the plan of the page, you've got to prioritize some of them. You can't do all of them, and you can't expect your officers to deliver on all of those 12 things, because they won't. They won't. Can't all of you cast your mind back to when you're a PC with 2 years service in? Could you focus on 12 things? I could barely focus on 1. So don't give them more than 3 things to focus on. But then if you change the focus, like the wind changes, then you're just going to come across as flaky. It's got to be consistent. So what I'll give you one. I think no matter what force you're in, vulnerability. Vulnerability. Would you agree there, Emma? I don't even know if it's on.
Yeah.
I don't even know, but I'll put money on it that it's on the plan on the page.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vulnerability, DV and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And even then, you can break off vulnerability into all sorts of different areas. Actually, I'd loop that back to. I've just looked at. I'd loop it back to gun crime. Every young person who's involved in gun crime is vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's where I'd go with it. So I just go with those three things. That's it. Just say, of course, I'd love to talk more about the other 9, but I've got 10 minutes. And so what I want to do is I want to give you an insight into my thoughts on what I think are the 3 most important things. And the reason why I know these things are the most important things is because I've already had a chat with an ACC, my chief superintendent, and the consistent message that keeps coming out is gun crime, retention, vulnerability. And because the senior officers in this force, believe those are the most important things at this moment in time, they're the most important things for me and the most important things for our constables, who of course have to deal with a myriad of everything every day, but they need to know what the 3 most important things are. And 2 of those things they've got control over, 1 of them they don't. 1 of them is in your gift, and 2 of them are in their gift. Does that make sense, Emma?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, which one's in your gift and which are the 2 that are in their gift?
Well, I'd say recruitment in the sense of retention. It starts at your first supervisor, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So GMP at the moment have got the other 2 things. They just need to know what to do and how to do it when they come across vulnerability, and what to do and how to do it when they come across vulnerable people who are close to the world of gun crime. Would you put your hand on your heart, and I don't know what department you're in, you don't have to tell me, but would you put your hand on your heart and say that, yeah, I would say that everyone on response at this moment in time has got a really clear idea about what is expected of them when they come across vulnerable people, especially vulnerable young people who are connected with gun crime?
No, so my line of work really comes within vulnerability, but at a DC level. I work like for this CSE, CCE
Right.
team, or I've just come away from that, but that's my bread and butter at the minute. And no, because I regularly have to go to response to give, to each section to give them briefings on what to do when they come across this particular scenario.
Yeah. So there's a gap there then. And so what you'd be talking about in your presentation is about how you're going to close that gap. And I'd come up with some really funky ideas about how you're going to retain police officers. And it is not your latest, greatest retention team or whatever they're called. You've got what's their name again?
The stay interviews.
The stay interviews.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's not that. I know what happens in the stay interviews. It's just people who want a move from response. I wasn't born yesterday.
Yeah.
I'll just give you a clue. It's something we talk about in the academy. Your responsibility. It's not some other team's responsibility. As soon as something is some other team's responsibility, then they own that metric. And this is where I think, in terms of retention, a lot of forces getting it wrong, because they're looking at the stay team who go and do these stay interviews, thinking there's the solution. And I don't think it is, because now they own that metric. You don't, and it's got F all to do with you now. Whereas actually, it should have 120% of retention should be within the gift of their sergeants and their inspectors, in my belief. And that's where I'd go with this. That actually on my team, we're not going to need the state team, because by the time it's got to the state team, you're too late. You're too late. They've already decided. They've got itchy feet at that point. And so what are the things that you're going to do so that you don't even need to contact the state team, because you're not going to have that dilemma? Because they're holding a sword of Damocles over people. I will leave unless you move me too. I'm not saying everyone does that, but I know it happens. Well, this happens, doesn't it? This happens.
Yeah.
So I will leave unless X happens. It's just a way of getting the move. Not with everyone, but if it's a genuine, I'm going to leave because of things that could have been rectified 6 months ago, you're too late. They've already decided to go. They've already decided to go. So there's a lot of things that I think you can do that are going to actually keep people in the job without needing a state team. Because it's your responsibility, it's not theirs. Because now they've got that metric, haven't they? I mean, do you own that as a response sergeant? Do you own the metric for retention?
Do we own the metric?
Yeah. Like, do you
Well, I
get
would say so.
Does that happen? I mean, does it happen? Do you, as a response sergeant, do you ever get asked questions about your retention levels on your team?
Well, yeah. If there's people leaving, or there's people thinking of leaving, or there's so many people going for stay interviews, yeah, you've got to answer to that.
Oh, you get answered. So you're responsible for it when things are going wrong.
Yeah.
No. Who owns that metric? Who owns the metric? Who owns it? Who's responsible for it? Who answers to that metric? I'm not saying target. I'm deliberately not using the word target. I'm using the word metric. Who answers to that?
Well, it'd be the sergeant. I would imagine.
Oh, it's an interesting question, this, isn't it? So, in we've got people from other forces. You don't have to say what forces you're from, but who owns that metric for retention? Who owns it?
Personally, I would say HR.
Right. If HR own it, then they're answerable to it. So what's it got to do with you, sergeants? It's just interesting. I find it really interesting. I've always found it interesting in the police about who actually owns the metric. If it's everyone's responsibility, then you've watered it down straight away, and no one's actually got responsibility for it. The state team and HR probably. I don't know. I've not got the answer to that question. But Emma, you said, oh, if lots of people start leaving, then it's my problem, my metric. No, it's not. It's just that the people who hold that metric will come and ask you lots of questions about why so many people are leaving in your team. Whereas what I'm suggesting is that you put forward on when you deliver your plan on the page that you're going to be the person who's responsible for that metric. You're going to own it. On my team, I'm going to own this metric. I am going to be responsible for reducing the number of people leaving voluntarily from the police service on my team because I've got control over this. So I'm going to own that metric. And that's where I go with it, especially in Mr. Watson's world, because he likes his metrics. He loves his metrics. And you hear me deliberately using the phrase metric rather than target. Because I used to be in GMP. You give me any target, you give me any block of red on any rag chart, I can turn it into green in the space of a week. I won't have changed the world, but I'll have changed the actual color of the block. Because I was in GMP for 20 years. I was when I walked out the door of GMP, I remember muttering to myself on my last day, this force is so in the shit. It won't be long before it's big time in the shit. And I always thought it was going to be in the shit for the way it duked its stats, the way that it just fiddled around with stats, and it just made things made the world look green when actually everything was red. But everyone was an expert in it, and everyone was complicit in it, from the chief to everyone else. And I just walked out and thought, I've had enough of this. I've had enough. I remember putting it to I won't say the name of the chief constable because he's not here to defend himself, but I remember putting it to a chief constable from GMP who said there's nothing he could do about it. And I actually said to him, you might as well get your coat, and I might as well get mine. Because if what we're saying is we don't think targets are a good thing, because when we put targets in place, police officers find really interesting ways of just duking the stats and making reds turn to green when the world doesn't actually change. If we're saying that's a bad thing, and we're saying we can't do anything about it, even at the rank of chief constable. We might as well just get our coat, eh? And yeah, interesting times. I walked out thinking one day this force will be so in the shit, and then I think it was about 4 or 5 years later it went into special measures, and I could have predicted that. I did predict it actually in my own head, but it's such a shame. It's such a shame, and I think the danger is that we go back into that world, and that's why I talk about metrics, not targets, because as soon as you wrap targets around things, your officers will do perverse things to hit those targets. Whereas if it's a metric, you're using it as part of your data that gives you an insight into what questions I should be asking and who should I be asking those questions of. That my own personal thoughts. Does that resonate with people? Anyone got any thoughts on that? Go on, Emma, your thoughts on that? That metrics should be used to ask intelligent questions of people to understand the world better.
I definitely agree. I mean, I can go back to, and there might be others here that, you know, where we did work to targets, and it was, it wasn't really a motivator because, you know, you got 3 detections in a month, 3 arrests in a month, whatever your detection might be. You hit 3, then you sat back and you was like, I've done mine for the month. And we all did it.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got me 5 stop checks in for this month. I've got me. You was working to that target and then stopping. You know, and it doesn't do anything for morale. And then you've got other lines of work where they didn't hit those targets because they've got hidden work. They've got work that isn't managed by targets, and they were always trying, you know, bending over backwards trying to hit those targets and to do this hidden work. So I agree. I don't believe in targets at all.
No, and that's where I'd go with your plan on a page, talk about metrics. And the reason why you're going to use metrics is to ask better, more intelligent questions of your officers so you can understand the problems that they're having. Because police officers will only not perform for a few different reasons. One, because they didn't know they had to. So if you just look at stop and search, no one told me I needed to do stop and searches. Yeah, well, I'm telling you now, he needs to do them. The second one would be, I don't know how to do them. Okay, it's a training thing. I'm going to show you how to do them. The third would be, I didn't know you needed me to do these by next week. So you didn't put a time scale on it. Well, I'm telling you now, you need to do whatever it is by this time next week. I'm not suggesting stop and search, but it could be something completely different. Or the other another one is they're just not motivated, in which case that's on you again, because you need to motivate them to want to do the thing that the chief wants them to do. And I do believe stop and search is an outstanding tool if used correctly, not against low-hanging fruit, which as soon as you apply targets, you just get stop and search against a load of low-hanging fruit. And the fifth one, I guess, is people don't perform around stop and search because they can't. Because they can't. There's some organizational block. And just off the top of my head, I'm thinking it could be a particular person in the control room who every time someone shouts up to say, I'm just about to do a stop and search, could you just show me whatever state it is these days? They say, actually, no, you can't, because I've got X, Y, and Z that you need to deal with. And so your officers just go, do you know, I've tried to do these stop and searches 5 times over the past 2 weeks. And every time I shout up to say I'm going to do a stop and search, I get told, no, you're not, you're going to go and do something else. In which case, it's a organizational barrier that's been created for them, and that's why they're not performing. Emma, can you think of any other reason why people don't perform?
Other than those that you've just said?
Yeah.
Well-being. You know,
that's in motivation.
Yeah. Not off the top of my head, no.
It's not a trick question. I'm just interested because I've given us a lot of thought over the years that the reason why people don't perform is they didn't know they had to, they didn't know how they needed to, they didn't know that you actually needed them to do it by a certain time. They're not motivated, or there's an organizational block, and I can't think of any other reason why people don't perform.
No, it's usually down to either an educational need or a fear of some sort, some kind of trauma, which I suppose goes into motivation, or just that they just don't want to. They're
not motivated, so you need to motivate them.
Yeah.
So again, those are some of the things that we explore. You know, how would you actually do those things? How would you actually ensure that people are aligned? How do you go about working out one officer's not doing what they're meant to be doing, how do you go about working out which of those 5 things it is? Because there's no point in beating them over the head with targets when they're just going, yeah, but every time I try and do this, I'm being sent on another job and being told that's just going to have to wait, or actually something more important's cropped up. I'm just using that as an example. Anyway, I've got to go. I've just realised, I've just looked at the time. In 2 minutes' time, I'm doing an Ask Brendan Anything, which is only for Academy members. So yeah, it's like the same thing, but we go deeper. We just go deeper. But Emma, was that helpful this evening?
Really helpful, thank you.
Yeah, get practicing. You've just got to start practicing now. You've just got to get in the trenches and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. Because if your first rehearsal is on the day of your board, it's too late. It's not going to work. It'll just be it'll be a nightmare. It'll be 10 minutes that you think, I wish I had that time again. I wish I prepared better for it. You just need to be doing that presentation a lot. It's going to take a lot. It takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of preparation, it takes a lot of practice as well. But when you get that off slick, the good thing about it is you've just made that really slick, and it's just got them on the edge of their seats thinking this person can add value, because ultimately your presentation has got to demonstrate how you're going to add value to their team. If it doesn't demonstrate how you're going to add value, then why should we promote you? So that sets you in a really, really good place for your next set of 6 questions, because you're already feeling confident and they're already feeling confident in you, and it just makes all the difference. Whereas if you deliver a terrible presentation, those 6 questions just turn into a nightmare and you just struggle. And they've lost confidence in you because you delivered a dog's dinner of a presentation. So hopefully helpful for you. How can we sum that up? Focus on no more than 3 things. Put yourself in the context of being an operational sergeant, not the role that you're in at the moment. And add value. Make sure that everything that you talk about adds value and gets them to sit on the edge of their seat thinking this is different, as opposed to this is a shopping list. Because at the end of the day, you need to be the one that they remember.
Yeah.
Because they've just had about 6 or 7 bright sparks in front of them, all hoping to get their stripes sewn on, not Velcroed on. And you need to be the one they remember. Because if you're not, then you're the one that gets forgotten about and gets failed. And I think Steve Watson's already said he'd much rather keep people in temporary roles than promote the wrong people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not about, oh, they've got loads of vacancies, I'm guaranteed to secure a pass. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Anyway, was that good, everyone? Are we going to come back next week?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And shameless plug, if you'd like to find out more about the Academy, where we can actually guarantee a result for you, if we decide to work with you, drop me a line. We can have a call. It won't be me. It'll be either Deborah or Matt, who are our career success coaches. They'll have an initial conversation with you and work out, actually, can we work with you? And do you want to work with us? And, are you the sort of person that we can actually guarantee the result for? Because we actually do that as well. Because if you don't pass, we work with you again. If you don't pass the second time, we give you all your money back. And we think that's fair.